get ready for a first date. Let's get ready for another date. Going on a first date. Let's get ready for another first date. Let's get ready for my 6th first date this year. Let's get ready for my 7th first date of the year. Let's get ready for my 8th first date of the year. Let's get ready for my 9th first date of the year. Get ready for date number 6, 7, 8. I don't know, they're blurring together. Do not listen to words.
26 first dates, 1 year, 37 hours spent getting ready for men she'd mostly never see twice. And every single time, she said the exact same thing.
I'm walking up to a first date right now. We matched on Hinge. We accidentally ran into each other at the gym before the date. This is what I'm wearing. We're getting coffee. I will report back. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Try not to get excited, but that went really well. Oh my gosh. Okay. He's really nice. And he's so handsome. And it was a great date. Okay, bye.
He's so sweet. He's such a gentleman. This could be really something. But here's really what stopped me. The woman saying all of this had already built an entire career telling other women the exact opposite.
Men are pretty simple creatures, and I obviously haven't figured them out entirely, but here's what I've learned throughout my 20s that I wish I knew, now being 29, almost 30. If he is not showing you effort, and you are somehow tripping off him, you are falling for potential, not patterns. And I hate to say it, but you need to hear it just like I did. That potential could never grow into anything, leaving you at a point where you've just completely overcommitted your mental and emotional, and maybe physical, energy to something that will never actually reciprocate or turn into the situation you have in your mind. It seems so simple, but I really wish I had someone who told me point blank.
Remember this. Danielle would also
telling women to not chase men, don't rush into anything, to watch what a man does, not what he says, to fall for patterns and not fall for potential, which really is all great advice. But what happens when the person handing out the map can't seem to follow the map herself? And then not only that, 9 months after meeting a man at the gym, she stood on a cliff in Half Moon Bay in a dress that she altered 20 times and said yes to a wedding. Well, what happened is that the internet did not believe her. And by the time you finish this video, I think you'll understand exactly why. And I think a few of you are going to even recognize something about yourselves in it too. So hang in there. And if you don't know who I'm talking about yet, her name is Danielle Walter.
I'm about to quit my job, and I thought I would document this. I feel so nervous. I am terrified, but I know it's the right thing to do. Schedule a meeting with my boss in 5 minutes. Okay, here we go. My boss was amazing. I made it a point to say I've always felt really valued and have loved being at the company, and that sentiment was echoed, and that they've always really appreciated me, and they've been aware of my social media for a while and have basically commended me for being able to do both. And it got to the end of the call where I said, I just really appreciate everything that you guys have done for me, because when I started at this company, I had no idea how bad of a sales rep I was, and I had 2 managers over the last 4 years. The amount of time and energy they invested in me and taught me how to be a good salesperson.
And before any of this, before the dating series, before the docuseries, Danielle Walter had a completely ordinary, completely respectable life. She studied business at San Jose State, and she spent close to a decade in tech sales in the Bay Area, one of the most competitive, highest pressure sales environments there is, with real quotas, real stakes, and real structure. And here's something she said herself, plainly, on the day that she quit in 2024. She started as a genuinely bad salesperson, that it took 2 managers and years of patient coaching before she got good at something that clearly didn't come naturally to her. And I want you to hold on to that detail because it matters later, and we will talk about it again later. So this is a woman who has direct lived proof that she can get better at hard things slowly with the right support around her.
3-year-old I wish I knew when I was 25. That extra shot at the end of the night is not worth it. You shouldn't take it. Always lay your pajamas out before you go out. You don't need to reach your goal right now. You have time. Speaking of time, you get to define who you are. You never run out of time to do that. And that can always change. The people who want to be in your life will be. And the people who don't will weed themselves out. Sometimes somebody's purpose in your life is to teach you something. As much as you try, you are not in total control of everything that happens. The best way to deal with men is actually to not focus on them. If you want certain things in your life, try giving that to others. If you want to feel a certain type of way, try giving it to yourself.
So Danielle started posting on the side after a breakup. There was no real strategy. There was no brand. It was just a woman talking straight into her phone. And it worked immediately. And it worked because of one very simple reason. It worked because she said the quiet part out loud. She said the stuff about dating and self-worth that a lot of women think but rarely hear said back to them plainly. And here's the open loop that I want you holding on to throughout this video, which is everything Danielle built her name on, which was patience, boundaries, not chasing, watching for effort instead of words, was about to be tested by her own life. And it was about to be tested over and over and over again. And every single time, with every single test, we got to watch in real time what happens when the advice giver meets the exact moment that her own advice was written for.
I've never done it God's way. I've never waited. And I believe that that is a fundamental piece of why I'm still single. Yes, I recognize that there are people that don't share our faith, that don't wait until marriage, that get married and have great lives. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but I can speak to my testimony and I'm still single, okay? I do also think that in those situations that, we all have that friend that, or friends, probably lots of friends that didn't do this God's way and still ended up getting married or with partners or living with them or whatever. But I bet you there are things that are coming out of having sex before marriage, challenges, problems, issues, that would not be challenges, problems, and issues if it wasn't happening. Again, this is not a religious rule. This is if we want certain outputs, which I want a forever partnership with someone. I have Jesus, but you know what I'm talking about. I want a husband. I really, really want that person to spend time with, to make decisions with, to travel with, to eat with, to laugh with, to watch shows with, to read the word with, to worship with. And something I've been thinking about a lot is whenever I fall into the trap from the enemy of, oh, just give in, just, do it. It's never to please the other person. Like, I want it. I want to have sex, and we know that this is a thing. It's like the flesh that we have to kill, and our flesh has to die daily. But when I was really thinking about it, what I ultimately want is that partnership. And the sexual aspect of it, when I really break it down, and maybe you identify with this, is to try to fabricate the feeling of what that might feel like once I actually have that partner.
Danielle's faith isn't a footnote in her story. It's the load-bearing wall in her life. She talked openly about her years attending a large non-denominational church, singing in the worship team, and about what she calls her testimony, which is years-long journey with God that reshaped how she sees her entire life, including her singleness. And here's the belief underneath it, in her own words, that not being married yet is, at least in part, a consequence of the choices she made earlier. Choices she made before she started, in her words, dating God's way. And there's a name for carrying pain like that. It's something called a shame-based framework. When an ache doesn't just get to be an ache, it has to be earned or explained or atoned for. And that's a heavy thing to build a life around, because it means every date isn't just a date anymore. It's a little bit of referendum on whether you've done enough yet to deserve the thing that you want so badly in life. Now, I do want to name something directly because it's out there and the discourse around her. Some commenters online have speculated, and I want to be very clear that this is just speculation, not anything documented or confirmed, that her faith-forward content might be connected to funding from religious or political interests. I haven't seen any evidence for that claim, so I'm not going to treat it as fact. But what I can speak to, which is actual footing, is what she has said herself about her faith and about her sense of romantic destiny. Because that part isn't speculation. That part is on record in her own words. And that's a piece that I want you to keep close as we go forward, because it explains something that's about to look on the surface like pure impulsiveness, but it isn't. It's a woman trying to resolve a debt that she doesn't actually owe. So let's talk about the first blueprint, the one that almost nobody remembers because it happened before anyone was really watching it. In February of 2023, Danielle posted her first viral Get Ready With Me.
Let's get ready to see my boyfriend.
I have no time, so I'm just gonna do as much as I can while he's on his way, and that's that. We are going shopping first. He's like taller. If you guys have suggestions where to go for like taller men's clothing, I've decided that my concession is that he'll show up and I'll have wet hair. That's what I can't get done. I still haven't picked out my outfit for today, so we're like cutting it real close.
Getting ready to go see a boyfriend. By June, which was 4 months later, he was meeting her friends. Not long after, he was then meeting her family. And then, just as quickly as he arrived, he was gone. There was no public explanation, no real closure. The content simply just reset, like the relationship had never even happened at all. And I want to be really clear about something here, because it would be easy to make this about him, but really it's not. We don't know what happened between two people in private, and that's exactly as it should stay. But what I want you to notice isn't the ending, it's the shape, okay? Which is the relationship was fast built. There was real intimacy that signaled publicly within weeks. Then there was sudden silence. Then there was a clean reset. That shape or cycle is going to come back around again and again and again in Danielle's story as we further explore it.
I am walking up to a first date right now. We matched on Hinge. We accidentally ran into each other at the gym before the date. This is what I'm wearing. We're getting coffee. I will report back. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Try not to get excited, but that went really well. Oh my gosh. Okay. Hello. He's really nice. And he's so handsome. And it was a great date. Okay, bye.
So here's a tiny moment that I think tells us something bigger, which is that Danielle went on one quite unremarkable date with a man from the gym. Nothing dramatic happened. She even said in her own words that she felt a little silly making a video about it. Something so small and making a video about it. And yet, what did she do? She posted the video anyway. And that's not criticism of her. Most of us do things that we are a little unsure about and we still go through with them regardless of whether we're unsure about it or not. But it is a clue. Even when a moment didn't feel like it carried enough weight to share, the instinct to document that moment and put it out for the world was still stronger than that doubt that she felt. And then there's the date that actually made her famous beyond her own following.
Hinge. I know nothing besides he's good looking and Christian. This is what I'm wearing. And I'm very excited. I'm actually not nervous. I feel like I used to think first dates were so scary. But then I realized that I'm confident in who I am and it's really just getting to know someone and deciding if you want to be around them again. So there's no nerves. I'm really hungry. That did not go well. Very nice guy. Very sweet, very handsome, very attractive, very successful. But I feel like I was just like talked at for the last 2 hours. The dinner was great, but I was just like talked at.
Which was the one where she says a man talked at her for 2 hours straight. It hit Newsweek. It hit 1.5 million likes. And it worked because it was universal. And almost everyone watching it had been on a date exactly like that, where they were just being talked to. But notice what's already forming here. This early, before Lucas, before the docuseries, before any of the big controversy, which is a pattern of fast intimacy, then sudden disappearance, and then a woman whose entire livelihood depends on turning her own heart into something that the rest of us can watch. And that's not a flaw unique to Danielle. That's the operating cost of the exact job that she chose. And we're going to come back to that cost again and again throughout her story, because I don't think it ever stopped being expensive.
Get picked up on a second date with Pilot Man. We're getting dinner and then we're going rock climbing. So it's the first date I've ever had to study for. I'm wearing tank top and yoga pants. I'm really excited. I don't feel nervous. This is the first second date I've been on in a long time. I'm gonna be back after. Tell you how it goes. I thought I wasn't nervous, but I'm starting to get butterflies. It's like 3 minutes out and he's coming to pick me up from my house. Oh my gosh, you guys. I just got home. First of all, he brought me flowers. How pretty. I was really nervous because I didn't know if like the certification I got a long time ago was going to carry over and I was going to have to take a test, but they still had me in their system, so I didn't have to test. But that also meant that he was going to teach me everything, and he was so patient and so kind with me and like just taught me everything. And he held my hand while we were walking out. We were saying goodnight and we kissed and it was good. Oh my goodness. So
for a while, Pilot Guy, he looked like a real thing. They had 3 dates, a FaceTime in between because his schedule kept pulling him away. And then they had rock climbing on the second day, a hand slipping into hers on the walk to the car, a kiss goodnight that in her words was good. He was consistent when he could be. He stayed in touch during the weeks he was gone. And Danielle spoke about him in a lighter, softer voice than almost anyone she had before him. And then what happened? His schedule changed.
Long-awaited Pilot Man update. And I don't want to break anybody's heart, but I don't know what's going to happen. So he has a schedule where he's home for 2 weeks and then he flies out for 2 weeks. And logistics have changed. So now he's out where he is until the end of summer, which doesn't really line up for us to go on follow-up dates or continue to get to know each other for the foreseeable future. And I don't know when or if he's coming back. And yes, you can get to know someone via text and phone call, but there really hasn't been that much exchange between us. And I am very old-fashioned in that if a man wants to talk to you, he will make it happen. So I have been responsive when it happens, but it hasn't really happened that much. So it's not a never, it's just a probably not right now.
And she said something I think is actually really healthy. She said, it's not a never, it's a probably not right now. And that right there, that's mature. That's a regulated thing to say. That's someone applying the brakes on purpose.
That man was probably it's not a never, but a probably not right now, just because of scheduling. He's gone, this and that. So I went out with someone else. And while I was on the date with someone else, I get a text from Pilot Man asking to reconnect on a phone call while he's gone. So I said, yes. Okay. That went really well. He's not going to be home for like another month, but there may be some exciting things where maybe I might fly to Hawaii to see him. So I don't know.
Okay, so 5 days. This is how long the healthy, regulated version of Danielle lasted. 5 days later, one text from him, and suddenly she's talking about flying to Hawaii to see a man she just called logistically impossible in a clip previously. And here's the reason that whiplash happens, and it's not because of weakness. In psychology, we sometimes talk about intermittent reinforcement, which is when a connection comes unpredictably instead of steadily. The nervous system doesn't calm down between contacts. It actually gets more activated, more hooked, because it never knows when the next hit of reassurance is coming. It's the same mechanism, incidentally, that makes a slot machine more compelling than a vending machine. So Danielle wasn't being reckless. She was responding exactly the way that a nervous system wired for anxious attachment is built to respond to unpredictable closeness. And I want you to notice what I said. I said she was responding exactly the way a nervous system wired for anxious attachment is built to respond to unpredictable closeness. That's a key right there. Being an anxious attachment and having unpredictable closeness running hand to hand. And here's how it actually ended.
I just got off the phone with Pilot Man, and I'm so sorry to do this to you guys, but this is it. It's over. What I do isn't for everyone, and sometimes it's hard to know that until you are part of my story that's being shared here. But this is something that's non-negotiable. It is my passion. It is what I believe my purpose is. I believe this is why God put me on this planet, is to capture the human experience and share it so that other people feel empowered to live their lives. But sometimes, just depending on the person, it's not for everyone.
Not because the chemistry faded, but because he understood clearly what dating her would really mean, which would be being written into a story that hundreds of thousands of strangers would watch, that hundreds of thousands of strangers would weigh in on, that hundreds of thousands of strangers would judge in real time. And some people, they can carry that, they can hold that, they can do that. And some people, they just can't. And that's not a flaw in either of them. That's just a mismatch between one person's job and another person's need for a private life. Then came the man that people nickname the singer guy, which is the one a lot of her audience were quietly kind of rooting for.
Picked up for a third date. I don't even know where to start. This man is doing everything right. The last time he picked me up for a date, he had a huge bouquet of flowers. We went roller skating, we went to dinner. It was just the best. He's on his way. He lives over an hour away. This is Singer Man, and I'm excited. We haven't been able to see each other since I've been gone for Fashion Week, and then I went to San Diego right after that. So it's been a couple weeks since we've seen each other. This is the first third date in a really long time. So I'm gonna come back and tell you how it goes. I just got home. That was a good date. I don't know how I feel. He's very nice. You know what it is I'm so used to being triggered emotionally and psychologically that, you know, when they're like, you don't want the guy that gives you butterflies because that's your anxiety taking a hold of you. I feel very secure with him, and I am still getting to know him. I understand that, but I think safe and secure is how I'm feeling.
He drove over an hour for every date. He bought her an enormous bouquet of flowers. He was, by her own account, patient, funny, a genuinely good conversationalist. And then what happened?
Man update. I'm sorry. I hate to break it to you guys, but we are no longer seeing each other, and we haven't been for a couple weeks now. So here's what happened. He was doing all the right things. We had gone on 3 dates. On our second date, he had mentioned that he had a race coming up, like running, half marathon situation. And I think it was like local to where I live. And he had mentioned like, oh, you should come to it. And, you know, this is the second time ever seeing this man. And so I was like, oh yeah, maybe like that, you know, we'll see. Then the race comes around. I had said, I'm so excited for your race. And I'm excited for you for your race. But he's like, are you coming? And to me, I was like, that feels very girlfriend territory. And I've always done way too much too soon. And so for me standing on the sidelines of a marathon, cheering a man on that I've only been on a few dates with, just seemed too like not what I should be doing. So I said, oh no, I meant I'm excited for you for your race. And then he didn't reply.
He asked her to come cheer him on for a half marathon that he mentioned on their second date. And what did she do? She said vaguely to him, maybe. Then as it got closer, she decided that showing up for him and cheering him on at this half marathon felt too much like being his girlfriend. And it felt too soon. So what did she do? She didn't go. And I want you to sit here for a second, because I think that this is a moment that's worth trying to understand rather than judge. Showing up for someone's race isn't actually girlfriend territory. It's just what we do for people we like early on before any label even exists. But For somebody with an anxious attachment pattern like Danielle seems to exhibit, then closeness itself can feel like the risk, because the closer you get, the more there is to lose. So pulling back right when someone starts to matter, that isn't cruelty. It's often self-protective distancing, which is all about creating a little emotional runway room before the fall can really freaking hurt. So here's the part that I do want to name honestly, with compassion, but without softening it in any way. He had been showing up consistently for weeks. And when he wanted her to reciprocate, it didn't come back in time when it mattered most to him. So he went quiet. And that right there, that's understandable. It's hurt. That doesn't make him a villain.
I could be speculating, so it could be something else, but what it feels like to me is this guy was also doing a lot of like grand gestures. He got me that huge bouquet. He also did a couple other things for me. Maybe, this is what I can read into it, and I could be wrong, maybe he felt like it wasn't being reciprocated, because to me, I'm not there yet. After going out a few times, like I've worked so hard to get to this point where I'm not getting like wrapped up in someone that I don't know yet. So I wish him well, but I'm not in the business of chasing men down.
And retroactively calling every earlier kindness love bombing once things end, that's not really about him. That's often what it looks like when we need the story to make sense in a way that protects us from feeling like we might have gotten something wrong. So it's what we need to try to make ourselves feel better. And that doesn't make Danielle a bad person, and makes her a person managing a very old fear the best way that she currently knows how. And then let's fast forward.
Man sits down next to me. He's gorgeous. I cannot believe what just happened. I took myself to a restaurant for breakfast. I get a seat at the bar. It's just this little diner. This man sits down next to me. He's gorgeous. We get to talking, and we basically went on an impromptu date at this diner. And I'm like so giddy. Then we're talking about like what I'm up to, and I said I was here for Fashion Week, but it's my day off. I want to go thrift shopping in Brooklyn, so he offers to take me. So I get in this man's car, and he's just the sweetest ever.
It's Fashion Week. A stranger sits down next to her at a diner counter. Within the hour, she's in his car, driving to Brooklyn. It's spontaneous, it's cinematic, it's the kind of story that sounds made up because it's exactly the kind of story that we all secretly want. And then comes a detail that's so small that it's almost funny.
Rated New York man update. Things were full steam ahead. It felt like a rom-com meeting at a diner and then going out later that night on a date. But unfortunately, a couple of things happened. We both had expressed that we mutually wanted to see each other before I left New York. And by the way, I'm in San Diego right now, so I'm on the other side of the country. So 2 nights before I left, I made it really clear that I would love to see him. And he said, "Oh, I thought you had events, so I confirmed plans with my friends, blah, blah, blah." And at first I was like, no problem, honor your plans, call me later kind of thing. And I'm not a sports girl, so I looked up the game that they were supposed to be watching during their boys' time, and it started at 8:15 p.m., which means that he wasn't going to be free until like 10:30. And he said, "Okay, I'll go, but I would love to see you at some point if that's okay, like some point that night." Now, our first date was late. We met up at like 10 p.m. for drinks, but that was okay because it was impromptu. It was, sort of a whirlwind romantic kind of thing. We met that day, going out that night, blah, blah, blah. But something about meeting up at like 10:30 and still without finalized plans that he was gonna hit me up didn't sit right with me. Anyway, 10:30 rolls around and he texts me. He doesn't call me. He texts me and says, "What are you up to?" And so the next morning I just let him know I went to bed early preparing for a full day of events because I was in New York for Fashion Week and I did have a full day of events. And what he said next really just solidified it for me. He said, I figured you went to sleep, but I felt bad because I really wanted to see you." Now, at first glance, seems sweet, right? But the problem here, and what I realized, is that This whole thing of us seeing each other could have been resolved very easily by him saying very simply, I would love to see you again. I know you're here for work. Let me know what your schedule's like and we'll see if that aligns, like planning something. And he couldn't do that or didn't do that. So we didn't see each other again. I had time to get together again. He just didn't ask and coordinate. And it's not my place, I believe, as a woman, to drive the situation.
Which is that he had plans to watch a game with friends. So he said that he would text her once it's wrapped up. And around 10:30, he did exactly that. But she didn't answer. So the next morning, she explained that she had gone to sleep early. And here's the quiet irony that's worth naming. Danielle has said clearly and more than once that ghosting is never okay. And in the exact moment, she did the thing that she condemned. And not out of malice, but because the loose plan didn't match a level of certainty that she needed to feel emotionally safe and secure. So she ghosted. And none of these three men were villains. None of these situations were dramatic in isolation. But look at what's forming here. There is a date after date after date, guy after guy after guy. There is intense hope. And then there's a flinch right at the moment. Things could deepen. And then there comes a story that gets written afterward to make the ending feel like it's someone else's fault. Each and every time, this is a pattern. And that is not a coincidence anymore when it's repeated. When something is on repeat here like this, then it is a pattern that we got to name. And in a few sections, we're going to actually name it properly all the way through, because I don't think you can understand what happens with Lucas without understanding this pattern that Danielle's exhibiting first.
Gosh, that was an incredible date. I show up and he's so cute and he's sweet. He's like gentle golden retriever. He had such thoughtful questions. He's also active in his faith, which was apparent in the way he spoke, the way he treated me, and from what I can tell who he is as a person. And I think part of first dates is just knowing if you want to go on a second date, and I definitely want to go on.
So by early 2025, Danielle said that she was trying something new, slower, more selective, and for a while, Philly guy looked like proof that it was working. He was thoughtful. He was active in his faith. He walked her all the way to her car every single time, which, small as it sounds, is the kind of detail that people remember, that people lock in, that people feel.
About Philly man. So after our third date, which was the last video I posted, we both agreed to take some time and think about, the whole social media thing. Because I basically was like, I'm not changing what I'm doing for someone. Like, this is what I do. So you either can hang with it or you can't. And I totally respect if you can't. And we just had a great conversation about thinking about it. And then I didn't hear from him. And I thought that was that.
And then after their third date, something quietly mature happened. They talked honestly about whether her career and his comfort level could actually coexist with each other. They agreed to sit with that question for a bit. And that's not a red flag. That's two adults doing the hard, unglamorous work of figuring out compatibility before they are too far in for that to even matter.
So simultaneously, I was en route to a conference at my church, just busy. And I get this long text from him. And I'm obviously not going to read it, but the summary, it was really nice. The summary was, I did a lot of thinking in order to really understand. I watched some of your content about me. And just a really nice, respectful message about how he appreciated what I do and thought it was respectful the way that I shared information without giving away privacy, and agreeing with me that I should never have to run my content through a man or my partner to get approval. And I think he asked me out again. And I was busy. So he took I don't even remember the time, but a week and a half to text me. And I'm the type of person that I can't send you a really thoughtful message if I'm busy. And I thought that required a very this was a multiple paragraph text that he sent me, and I wanted to respect that he put a lot of thought into this, and so craft him a good response because that's what it deserved. But I was not in the mental space in order to do that. I was busy. This conference that I went to was nonstop. So I took like a week to respond to him.
So weeks later, while she was away at a church conference, he sent her a long, considerate message, the kind that takes real effort to kind of write. And she didn't respond to that message for a week because she said she wasn't in the right headspace to give a message like that the response that it deserves. So by the time she did reply, what had happened is he had already moved on. And here's what I don't want you to miss in that, because it's easy to call this hypocrisy and move on. Danielle has said clearly more than once that ghosting is never okay. And here she is doing the exact same thing she said wasn't okay, at least very close to doing that thing. But in psychology, when someone who fears abandonment goes quiet instead of risking an imperfect reply, that's often what's called protest behavior. It's an attempt to control an uncomfortable feeling by controlling the timing of your own vulnerability. And that doesn't undo the impact that it had on him. It just means the explanation isn't carelessness. It's fear that's kind of wearing a costume of being busy. Just think about what protest behavior is actually protecting against. When someone with an anxious attachment pattern goes quiet instead of responding badly or too honestly or too rawly, they're not managing the other person. They're managing themselves. They're buying time until they feel steady enough to respond in a way that won't blow the whole thing up. And the problem is that from the outside, silence doesn't read as fear. What silence reads as from the outside is indifference. So the person on the receiving end does the only reasonable thing that they can with the information that they have. They take the silence at face value and they move on and they leave. Which means that protest behavior almost always produces the exact outcome it was trying to prevent. The fear of losing someone creates the silence, and then the silence creates the loss. And afterward, it's easy to mistake that outcome for proof the fear was justified all along, that I knew it, when really the fear is what caused it in the first place. This last one I want to name is smaller, and maybe because of that, it's the clearest. A man Danielle had only been seeing a short while realized just how much of their time together was being filmed. Even small things, like her reaction to pulling away in an Uber after a date. And he wasn't comfortable with that, and he stepped away. So I don't think this one is complicated at all. Some people can build a life partly in public. Some people simply they cannot. And that's not a character flaw in either direction. It's just true about them as an individual. So here's what I want you to notice. Looking back across all of them, Nick, gym guy, pilot guy, singer guy, New York guy, Philly guy, Spark guy, they are all different men with different circumstances. And almost every single time, the story ends in the same two ways. Either closeness itself triggers a flinch and a retreat, or the very real cost of being loved in public becomes more than someone signed up for. Those are two different problems, but they share the same root. And I think it's time that we actually name that root properly, because everything that happens with Lucas only makes sense once we do. So after the San Francisco move, Danielle started talking about something that a lot of women, including a lot of you watching this, deeply needed to hear, which is decentering men, which is about putting your energy back into your friendships, to your work, to your own peace, instead of making every ounce of your identity depend on whether someone chooses you or not. And on her podcast, she went even deeper than that. She talked about therapy, about attachment styles, about emotional boundaries. It didn't feel like surface level content at that point. It felt like a woman actually doing the work out loud in real time, which is part of why it resonated so widely with so many people. And for a little while, it looked like it was actually working.
I deleted my Hinge. Okay, wow. Since moving here, I feel like things are going a mile a minute. There's so much going on. There's so much that needs to be done. I have too many priorities. And this may sound silly, but like if I know I have things that need to get done, I just feel paralyzed. Like I can't fully be present
until those things are done. So I'm working on relaunching the podcast. I need to design this entire apartment. I want to make friends. I want to build community. I want to try new things. I want to start new series, a bunch of stuff, and it's all good.
She deleted her dating apps. She leaned into her apartment, into her own company, into her own routines. Genuinely, this looked like growth from the outside as we're observing this and looking at this and consuming this. And I want to be really honest here. I don't think this was performance for her. I think it was real, which is exactly what makes what happens next so hard for us to sit with, because the message never actually stuck for long. She'd announced she was stepping back from the dating world. And within weeks, she came right back to the dating world and getting ready for someone new. And this is not hypocrisy and the way that the internet loves to frame it. This is what happens when someone genuinely understands a healthier belief intellectually, long before their nervous system has caught up to actually living inside of it. Psychologists sometimes call this a gap between insight and internalization, which is about knowing the right thing is true and still not being able to act from the truth yet. Because understanding a pattern and rewiring of the automatic response to that pattern are two very completely different kinds of work, two very completely different kinds of things. Knowing you should decenter men doesn't turn off the part of you that still feels unsafe until someone chooses you. It doesn't just happen that way. That part doesn't listen to insights or to logic. It only responds to time and to repetition and to enough evidence that safety doesn't actually depend on being chosen. And that right there, it takes hard work and commitment to get to that point, to get to that place. And she didn't do that hard work, and she didn't commit to that. So she didn't get to that point.
It really comes out right, but all I'm going to say, I've just discovered this Danielle Walter's woman, and all I'm going to say is this. It is not inherently wrong to want love and companionship and partnership. Like wanting a husband to love you and worship you and do life with. Nothing is embarrassing about that. There's nothing inherently wrong with wanting love. But when you make a limited series centering your boyfriend as if he saved you from singlehood and end the series saying to all the single girls, I was just like you. Like, you may as well just say, I was just like your pathetic single ass. Like, the worst thing to be in life is not single. As a woman.
And I understand where the frustration comes from. When your entire platform is built on teaching women not to build their whole identity around men, and then your biggest, most viewed content becomes exactly that, that gap is going to be visible and is going to sting for the people who trusted the earlier message that you delivered. But here's what I don't think anyone quite named yet. And it is the piece we need before any of the rest of this makes sense. Decentering men was never really the actual problem here to solve. The actual problem was underneath it the whole entire time, which is the fact that her nervous system had never fully learned that safety doesn't have to be secured immediately or it just disappears. And that's exactly the wound that Lucas walked into. The kind of trust isn't a belief you can just decide to have. It's something a nervous system usually learns the slow way through years of small proof. Someone leaves for a little while and then they return. Someone doesn't answer right away and it turns out to mean nothing at all. Enough of those moments, those small moments, they stack up over time. And the fear, it just quiets down on its own with those moments because the evidence, the stack of the moments, it just outweighs that fear. Danielle's nervous system never got the chance to collect that evidence, to have those moments. Not because anything was wrong with her, but because the men who could have provided it kept leaving before the pattern had time to reverse itself. Every ending, whatever the actual reason behind it, landed on the same old belief. See, it disappears if you don't secure it fast enough. That was her old belief. And these men kept landing on it. So by the time Lucas showed up, the wound wasn't new. It was just finally being spoken to directly by someone who, for once, didn't leave when the fear showed up. And that's not a small thing. That's exactly why it felt like destiny to her. But relief isn't the same as evidence. Feeling safe with someone in a month, one, isn't proof that safety is actually real in that relationship. It's proof that the wound finally found a voice that knew exactly what to say to it. And I want to play you something Danielle said about herself on her own podcast long before any of what's coming next happened. Because I don't think anyone explains this pattern more clearly than Danielle does.
Anxious attached girlies, I'm about to blow your mind. There's something called limerence, which is closely tied to anxious attachment, but no one's talking about it. And in layman's terms, limerence is like an unhealthy obsession or infatuation with someone without the facts, without knowing them. Your friend who gets obsessed with Jerry after their first date and is thinking they're going to get married, that's limerence. Someone who suffers with limerence identifies a limerent object and then becomes obsessed. And when this happens, the person with limerence just literally spirals. They have ruminating thoughts. Their mood is entirely defined based on how their limerent object is interacting with them. When they get a positive response from their limerent object, it's like the best high of highs. But when they don't get validation from their limerent object, it's like the lowest low. But what really kicks a limerent into overdrive is uncertainty. And this is why the phrase, if they liked you, you wouldn't be confused, doesn't work for us. Our brains don't register that. Our brains work differently. To us, the uncertainty of whether or not that person likes us is just an opportunity for them to prove that they do. And as we know, that's not the way that the world works. If you're a limerent, what are you supposed to do? Non-limerents would say, well, just don't be like that. But that's kind of like telling someone with anxiety to not be anxious.
She describes something called limerence. In her own words, thoughts that arrive without her consent. Imagining a man's last name behind her own within days of meeting him. Picturing a wedding before there's even been a second date. And here's what that actually is in plain language. Limerence isn't really about the person in front of you. It's about what that person represents to you. It's about the safety, being chosen, being enough. In your brain, it gets stuck on the idea of them faster than the real relationship has any right to move. And here's the second half of it, which she also names herself, which is anxious-preoccupied attachment. It's a deep hunger for closeness paired with a constant quiet fear that the closeness could just vanish. People with this pattern, they often move fast, not from carelessness, but because moving fast is the only way to quiet the fear, even just for a moment, a minute. And she didn't just experience this pattern. She could describe it clinically, accurately, on a microphone to thousands of people, which means the question was never whether Danielle understood herself or not. The question was whether understanding is enough to change what happens the moment the right person shows up, or even what happens in the moment the wrong person shows up. That's why understanding a wound and healing a wound, they are two completely different things on completely different timelines. Understanding can happen in an afternoon, listening to a podcast, listening to a journal, going to one good therapy session. Understanding can happen. But healing, it happens in the body, and it happens over years. And it happens with one lived moment at a time. And it happens usually far slower than we would like for it to happen. So when Danielle met Lucas and the pattern took over anyway, that wasn't her insight failing. It was proof that insight was never the part of her that needed fixing in the first place, which is the part that I most want you to sit with, because I don't think it's just true for Danielle. Knowing your pattern, it gives you the map. It doesn't hand you the muscle to walk a different road the moment your body is standing at the exact fork where the fear lives. That muscle only builds one way, which is by walking the new road anyways, and walking it slowly, and walking it on purpose, and walking it over and over again and again and again, long after the insight has already arrived. You have to do the work, not just know what work needs to be done. So watch what happens the day she meets Lucas.
I'm in the bathroom. I'm in the bathroom of the coffee shop. This might be my husband. He is so kind He is a true man of God, at least from what I can tell. He's just, I really like him.
Mid-date, not after, but mid-date from a coffee shop bathroom. She already is saying this could be her husband. Not because she knows him. How could you know him? This is just first date. But because he checked her boxes fast and said the right words. And her system did exactly what she just told us that it does, as she knows that it does.
Conflict resolution, and my anxious tendencies came up. I was terrified that you would leave. And I didn't have to say anything. You came to me and you said, and what I'm trying to say is this wasn't me teaching you this. You came to me and said, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, if we have a disagreement or whatever, we can feel what we're feeling, but I'm not gonna leave.
Yeah, because I can't lose your heart.
And then listen to what he gives her back. When her fear comes up, he doesn't get frustrated with it. He meets it instantly with exactly the words an anxious nervous system is starving to hear, which is, I'm not going anywhere. And this is often called mirroring, which is reflecting someone's deepest longing back to them so precisely that the connection, it just feels instant, even faded. And I want to be careful here because this doesn't make Lucas a villain. Plenty of people in the early rush of something exciting become the most attentive version of themselves without any calculation behind it. Sometimes that's just what falling fast looks like from both sides. But when one person's core wound is to prove I'm safe in this relationship and to prove it now, and the other person's instinct is to say the thing that makes her feel safe, you get something that looks like destiny instantly right there. And sometimes it's just two nervous systems reaching for the same type of relief at the exact same moment. It's just two nervous systems calming, co-regulating each other at the same time.
I fly to New York for Fashion Week, so we just make it official and then I'm gone. And this is going to sound really sappy, but that was really hard for us.
Yeah, that was really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were living for the last 2 months, like each 2 days we were together.
Yeah.
And like this all the time.
Yeah. That was when we made our rule about no longer than 3 days apart.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And here we are, 3 months in, they made a rule, never more than 3 days apart. And that's not automatically alarming because closeness isn't the enemy here, but notice what it's actually doing underneath. That's what we're focusing on here. Every reassurance, every 3 days, it resets the timer on the fear. It doesn't actually resolve the fear. The fear is still there. It's just resetting it. It just buys a few more days before the fear needs feeding again. And here's the logical knot worth sitting with gently. How do you know someone's words match their actions? When you're 3 months into a honeymoon phase and every single thing about the phase is designed by biology to feel like proof. You don't yet, not because anyone's lying, but because the chemistry of new love is specifically built to feel like certainty, whether or not certainty has actually been earned. And here's the part that I think matters more than any judgment of Danielle or Lucas individually, which is that she spent years teaching an entire audience how to recognize this exact moment in themselves. And when it finally arrived for her, recognizing it wasn't enough to change the outcome because insight and instinct, they do not live in the same part of the brain. That's not you forgetting the manual. That's two different systems doing two different jobs on two completely different timelines. The part of you that reads, reflects, and explains, the part of you can sit calmly and describe limerence and detail, is slow by design. It weighs things, it waits. But the part of you that reaches for safety that instant it senses a chance at it is fast by design. And it was built that way for a reason. In a real emergency, there's no time to deliberate. The problem is your nervous system doesn't actually know the difference between a real emergency and a man at a coffee shop saying all of the right things to you. To that fast system, unmet longing can register the same way that a fire alarm registers. And when that alarm goes off, The calm, reflective part of you, it doesn't get a vote. It just watches, same as everyone else, while the faster part of you already moved. That's the honest answer to why understanding a pattern does not stop it. It never had a fair fighting chance. One side had years to plan its response, while the other side only needs half a second. That's it, to act. And that's not a failure of intelligence. That's just what it means to be a person with a nervous system and a history. So now the real question becomes, once the cameras came out and this got turned into a 21-part series for millions of strangers, what happened to that insight then?
I'm here today to take full accountability. The docuseries. Let's talk about it. And the intention was to catch you up on what had happened since I took a step back. Like, get you up to speed, you know? And also introducing Lucas to my platform since he's here to stay. I was hoping that this was going to be entertaining and positive and received well, and also executed well, which it wasn't. And that's not at all what happened. Not even close.
After the backlash, Danielle did something a lot of public figures never do. She came back on camera and she said plainly that the docuseries didn't land the way that she hoped, that the execution, it was off, and that she took accountability for that. And I want to give her real credit for that. Owning a public misstep without deflecting entirely onto the audience, that takes something for a person to do. And that's not nothing. But here's the detail that stops me.
Okay, so first, the series being 21 parts. Swing and a miss. Swing and a miss. But I wanted to create this docuseries-like short series. This did not land at all the way that I wanted to creatively. And I realized that probably halfway through posting. I was talking to Lucas and I remember being like, I'm over this, so I can only imagine the audience is probably over this too, but I'm locked in. The content is done, and I'm halfway through. You have to finish.
She knew halfway through releasing a 21-part series that it wasn't landing. And yet, what did she do? She kept releasing it anyway. And I don't think she did this out of stubbornness. I think it's about what the series was actually for. Remember what we named in the last section. The need for certainty, the fear underneath the whole relationship. Sometimes when a connection moves faster than trust has had time to build, we look for something external and from the outside to make it feel official, to make it feel real, to make it feel undeniable. And in psychology, this sometimes functions as a kind of external validation seeking thing, which is using the size and performance of a public statement to settle an uncertainty that private trust alone hasn't had time to earn yet. So the docuseries wasn't just an update for her audience. I think it was evidence, mostly for herself, that this leap had been safe to take, that this relationship was the real deal for her. And her audience, they noticed the same gap that I just named. Even if they didn't have the exact clinical language for it, they noticed it. Some people appreciated the honesty, while others felt like the apology addressed the tone of the series without addressing the deeper question, which is why did the rules that built her entire career get abandoned the moment that those rules mattered the most? And that right there, that's a fair question to ask and to sit with, but it doesn't have to be answered with cruelty to be answered honestly. And then 9 months in, Lucas proposed at sunset on a platform overlooking the ocean. Visibly, no getting around it. It was stunning. But the proposal, it wasn't a surprise.
Get ready with me to get engaged. Okay, so the first part of this is obviously like, how do I know it's going to be today? We have been talking about our timeline since probably, I think, the second or third month of dating. Just kind of felt like we knew. And so what we decided on was we would get engaged in March, which would have been 9 months of dating.
And the way that usually we picture proposals, Danielle knew it was coming. She and Lucas had discussed the timeline together. They even practiced it at home beforehand. The ring was designed jointly, not chosen by him alone. And I don't think that makes the engagement less real, but what it tells us is something more specific. It tells us that this is what happens when two people who both feel safest with certainty lock down in advance and build a relationship together. And there's a name for that comfort, sometimes called co-regulation through predictability, which is about finding safety, not in a spontaneous trust, but in agreeing on the outcome ahead of time. So neither person has to sit with not knowing. And just because that's the case, it does not make it fake love. It's just love built by two peoples whose nervous system both prefer the map to be drawn out in advance. And then the engagement went out through a magazine feature, and the internet split exactly the way that it always does with Danielle. Some people genuinely happy for her after years of watching her search, others skeptical of just how produced the whole moment felt. And that split, happy for her or suspicious of her, is actually the whole story we need to understand now. Because I don't think the anger is really about a dress or a practiced proposal or even about Lucas or Danielle at all. I think it's about something a little closer to home for everyone watching. And that's exactly where we've headed next. So let's go back to where it started.
Let's get ready for a first date. Let's get ready for another date. We're going on a first date. Let's get ready for another first date.
Let's get ready for my 6th first date this year.
Let's get ready for my 7th first date of the year. Let's get ready for my 8th first date of the year. Let's get ready for my 9th first date of the year.
Get ready for date number 6, 7, 8. I don't know. They're blurring together.
Which was 26 dates, 37 hours getting ready, years of searching out loud in public so that the rest of us could watch. And here's what I think actually powered all of it. Not the outfits, not the men, not even the heartbreaks. It was not knowing yet. Every single video carried the same quiet promise. Maybe today's the day. And that uncertainty is what kept people coming back.
Just want to say to the single girl out there that's been watching and waiting for their person, our love story is for you. I started posting dating content as you years ago, and I never want to forget you. I want to encourage you that your person is on the way, and I want our story to give you hope.
Yeah.
I met my person at 32. Maybe yours is sooner, maybe yours is later, but I do know it will happen for you.
And then one day, the not knowing ended. She found someone. She got engaged. And the thing that had powered her entire platform for years simply stopped existing. And I don't think the backlash that followed is really about Lucas or the dress or the practice proposal. I think what happened is something closer to parasocial betrayal, which is when an audience has quietly built their own sense of safety on watching someone else's unresolved story. And that story resolves in a way that doesn't match what they were promised or what they still need to be true for themselves. And a lot of women watching Danielle for years weren't just watching her dating life. They were watching to see if the wait is ever actually worth it. So when the ending finally came and it looked fast or overly produced or too convenient to fully trust, that wasn't just disappointment in Danielle. For a lot of viewers, it landed as something closer to a broken narrative contract, an unspoken agreement that her long, messy search would resolve in a way that proved the waiting itself has meaning. And when the ending felt hollow, instead, it didn't just make people doubt Danielle. It made them doubt something bigger and made them doubt the hope that they'd been quietly borrowing from her story to get through their own life. The hope of, if I keep trying, keep waiting, keep believing, then it will eventually work out for me too. The hope that if I stay patiently and don't settle, then the right person will come along. The hope that being single right now doesn't mean that I'm doing something wrong. The hope that all the bad dates, the ghosting, the disappointment, that's not proof that it won't work out. It's just a piece of eventually getting there. The hope that the waiting and wanting eventually gets rewarded. And hope, when it feels foolish, it rarely stays still. It usually looks for somewhere to go. And anger is just easier to hold on to than grief. To sit with, it's easier to be angry than to grieve. because it feels like action instead of ache, like judgment instead of loss. So the comment sections, they filled with critique of her choices, when underneath a lot of it was really just mourning a promise that nobody ever really technically made, but everybody was quietly counting on anyway. And that doesn't mean every criticism of Danielle was unfair or that her audience owed her some blind support. But it does mean that the size of the anger was never really proportional to a dress or to a timeline or to a practice proposal. It was proportional to how much people needed her story to end in a certain way for their own sake and not for hers. So really the comments were more about them, more about you than it is about her and her life choices. So let me ask you something, and not about Danielle, but about you. Have you ever watched someone else's love story a little too closely, and not because you cared about them, but because some part of you needed proof that eventually works out for people like you? Have you ever needed someone else's timeline to make sense so that your timeline didn't feel so broken? Because here's the truth underneath all of this. And I think it's the whole reason this story has held so many people's attention for so long, which is the fact that none of us actually know if the wait is worth it until we're the one living inside of it. And Danielle, she didn't either. She was just brave or unguarded enough, maybe both, enough to let us watch her find out in real actual time. And this channel is all about emotional wealth. And if any of this felt a little too similar, then fast falling, fear of silence, the needing someone else's story to prove your own isn't broken, that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something worth understanding and then working on, gently, on purposely, with someone in your corner. And I'm in your corner. So like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next. Thank you for watching this.